All right, welcome Casual Fam. This is our second Holly's Hyperspace happy hour.
Woo!
Thank you.
Celebration music.
Celebration.
It goes on too long. I can't play it.
Okay, so we won't play the celebration.
No.
Sorry, this one had to get a little bit postponed. I think that we all know there's been a lot going on.
Did you not read the book? Is that what it was, Holly?
I actually did read the book.
Okay,
I read the book very quickly.
Just checking.
Did you read the book, Michael?
It was probably 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be of no use to this discussion.
Might have even been 3. When did this come out?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And it's 2 years ago. Jory's saying 2.
2.
So, as everybody can see, we are not doing a big in-house production today because we are actually listening to the advice of the CDC.
That's right.
So we're practicing social distancing.
So you were in my space a few minutes ago.
I was in your space a few minutes ago.
Please try to stay on the other side of the table.
So does social distancing apply to people who
are around each other all the time?
Right.
I think so. Like, let me ask these guys. Like, Jory, do you stay away from your kids, or I mean,
if we're supposed to, I'm screwed because my kids have been all over me, just night and day. Since I've been laid off anyways, but since the whole social distancing, they haven't went to daycare in like 2 weeks now, so it's been pretty much just nonstop with the kiddos, and the wife's been home. She had an extended weekend, so it's been a lot.
See, we know Luke's been home with his kids.
That's right.
I couldn't get away from him if I tried.
It looks like, sorry, honey, the at-home remote access just ain't working. Looks like I gotta go in.
8 hours to myself. No, because then you have to deal with other things. Just stay at home.
Absolutely.
Stay at home, folks.
Absolutely.
So Paige and Nate, how are you guys practicing your social distancing?
Well, I haven't left the house other than I went to Walgreens for 5 minutes last Saturday. Came immediately home, and I've been down in my cave ever since. And I'm avoiding my family as much as possible.
Nice.
That works.
You know.
Sounds like this house.
Yeah. Nate?
I mean, I live alone, so it ain't too hard for me.
We all have coping mechanisms.
Nettie, you gaming any during this time? So I fired up the update for Battlefront, so you may see me on there tonight or tomorrow.
Nice, definitely have to hop on.
Absolutely.
I've been playing that new Animal Crossing that came out. So.
See, I haven't even tried it yet.
Everybody keeps posting like their codes on Facebook, and I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
I wish I had a Switch. I don't.
Ugh. It's okay.
We have a Switch.
We do.
Not Animal Crossing though.
Nope.
But that's okay.
It's okay.
Well, so thank you everybody for calling and joining in. We would love to have you here in person, but I guess
Next time.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see
Hopefully.
how this goes. Yeah. So if you're here or if you're listening, then hopefully you read Leia, Princess of Alderaan. That was the novel that we chose to read for the last month. It's another good young adult novel by Claudia Gray. So I kind of wanted to start off by asking everybody, kind of like we did last time, what did you guys think of it? Luke?
Oh, I'm first up.
You're first up.
All right. Well,
sorry, I'm going in order of how I see people.
It's
on
the
the
Brady
screen.
Bunch here on this.
Okay. Well, I had the pleasure of reading this one a couple of years ago, and I think this is there's 4 Claudia Gray books so far, and going into a re-listen to it this time around, I was thinking this was kind of my third favorite of her 4, I think. But then you get into it, and it's amazing how good her third best is. And it's a lot more intense than I remembered the first go around. The drama is really intense at moments, and it's high stakes through a good portion of it, just like one scene after the other. So it was really enjoyable to go through a second time and get a little bit deeper insight this time around. So I think she's dethroned Timothy Zahn as the premier Star Wars author. Zahn was the king of the 90s, but Claudia Gray I don't think can be touched right now.
Yeah, I think that sounds true. I think she was very prominent at the last Star Wars Celebration and all the authors panels. I think she was in the front and spoke the most and had the most questions.
Yeah, the most fans.
The most fans.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people very excited. Paige, you also listened to the audiobook for not the first time.
Yeah, I was listening to this when you first came over and talked to me about the podcast, so I listened to it again. I liked it better a second time because I kind of spaced out a little bit the first time, and I agree with Luke. I mean, it's really action-packed at certain points, and I'm a big Padme person. Like, I'm wearing a Padme shirt, like, right now. So, and I am a big Leia person. I have a huge Leia tattoo on my leg, so I was really excited to listen to it again. So I thought it was really in character, which was good, because Leia can be kind of tricky to characterize, right? Which I have a problem with in some of the newer movies. And I liked all of the Padme callbacks too, which was really great. And some of the stuff from Naboo kind of gets touched on a little bit in the Padme novel too, which is good. So I liked all of that kind of stuff. I'm a big prequels person too, so all of that kind of stuff was really great. Like the celebration dress, I was really jazzed about. So
yeah,
nice.
That was like everything.
You referenced Queen's Shadow there. There's which is the Padme book by E.K. Johnston, and there's like a prequel to that coming out this year. So that's
I'm so
really
stoked.
Cool. Yeah.
So I liked it. I thought it was great. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah, that's good. So the second book was a hit. See, so far we're good. Nate, here. What did you think of?
Maybe muted.
What did you think of like?
Yep, my mic unmuted. So I definitely enjoyed it. I kind of started out and thought it was a little bit slow and not exactly what I was looking for, but it definitely picked up towards the end, I would say, and I ended up enjoying it pretty well. I will say I think I like Bloodline by Claudia Gray with Leia a little bit better, but I still thought it was a really solid book. So.
Yeah, I think Bloodline is another one that I have to read, and maybe down the line we'll read it for the book club, because I think that it will be interesting to see Claudia Gray writing Leia in two very different stages of her life. So I'm kind of excited to get into that one. So I haven't read that one yet, but I am looking forward to that. Jory.
I thought it was great. I just kind of like echoing what Luke just said. That Claudia Gray is by far and away, I think, just the queen of Star Wars right now. I don't know if I can think of anybody better at all. Like even Rian Johnson or even JJ at the moment. That I just think that what she does and how she does it is pretty amazing. But the book for me, I thought it was fantastic. I listened to it twice and actually was a third time through just because I enjoyed it so much and just wanted to make sure, had a little bit of extra knowledge coming into this. But it is a fantastic book.
Yeah. So three of you listened to it on audiobook. Nate, you read the actual physical copy, right?
I did, yes.
I wonder how different that experience is, because I feel like in my mind when I'm reading a book, I give my characters their own voice and I hear things being said a certain way. And so I think that Luke and I have talked about this before, how the audiobook kind of gives you a different interpretation of what's going on in the novels. How did that come through with all the action scenes when you were hearing it happen through the narrator?
The narrator did a pretty good job of giving most everybody a unique voice. It was the same narrator throughout, and she does kind of different accents. And definitely, I think I felt the drama more listening to it the second time versus reading it, because they add in some of the soundtrack, and the narrators do a really good job of delivering the dialogue. So I think that maybe increased the feel of the drama doing the audio experience this time around.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I had a problem with when I was listening to it a second time, because I'm a big soundtrack person too, they were playing the Luke and Leia music during a specific scene that I don't think they should have been playing the Luke and Leia music for. I was a little uncomfortable with Leia and the boyfriend. I was like, okay, maybe not the best choice, but okay, go off, that's fine.
It's out there, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, it's I listen to a lot of audiobooks now because it's just kind of hard for my eyes to focus on text. So it's like a movie for your ears is what I describe it to my friends who are like, I wouldn't listen to an audiobook. So I like it a lot better than reading books, but I also buy the books too just to have them. So
Yeah. Something that I really enjoyed about this novel is that when I was reading it, I could kind of hear Carrie Fisher's voice saying the things that Princess Leia was saying in the book. And I felt like the way that Claudia Gray wrote it was very true to the way that Carrie Fisher played Princess Leia in the movies, especially episode 4. I just felt like it kind of went really nicely right into how we see Princess Leia act in episode 4 with, her actions and the way she carries herself and just kind of that confidence that we see her gain throughout the novel. So that was something that I really enjoyed a lot about this book, is just how much I felt like it did tie into her character in the movies.
Yeah, I felt like at first she was a lot more like impulsive than we see her. I think she's a little more calculated by the time of the original trilogy and like more composed. And here she's all like angsty teenager. So it was kind of interesting to get that perspective in.
Oh, sorry, Luke. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
No,
I just was going to say it's really interesting that the events too only happen 3 years after this. So, she did a lot of growing up in that very short, period of time. And granted, I mean, when we look back, even, we do notice that we grow up pretty quickly. Even just you look at yourself 3 years ago from now, and you're like, man, I was doing some things, maybe not doing things, but the way you see life and see things, yourself. But I thought it was extremely well done. Is like Luke said, she was really angsty and very impulsive, and then we see her in A New Hope, and it's a completely different. I wouldn't say completely different, but she's grown up a lot in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. So we have this book, and it starts off. So what's happening? We do see a more angsty Leia, right? She is just very concerned about her parents not really paying that much attention to her, and she's going through this program that Brea set up, and we just kind of see her focus is on, she wants to impress her parents. She's getting ready to have an event where basically she's going to prove that she is able to take over if anything would happen to her mom, right? That she can be the next Queen of Alderaan. So we kind of see that's where her worries are at that point, and that's like really what she's so concerned about, right? And then we kind of see that change later in a little bit down the road when she starts questioning everything that's going on, when she meets up with the other people and the other ambassadors, really, and they start going through these challenges where she has to prove herself, right? What did you guys think about the different challenges that they had? So they had, I think the one that they talked about the most was she was excited to kind of do the physical challenges, the ones where she had to go out and like climb the mountain. And I think that was something that she really felt connected through her mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh. Crickets.
Maybe I didn't ask the right question.
No, that was a good question. What were some of the other challenges that she... it's been so long.
Yeah, the one with like the mudslide happened. I remember that one.
Yeah, well, I think the payoff for a lot of the physical challenge, other than adding drama for the different scenes where they are in some like physical danger, the big payoff is towards the end. When they hint at it early on that her mother did the same sort of physical challenge for her coronation, but then that end scene where she ascends to the peak with her mom, and you get the final explanation of why she has the like artificial heart and lungs that get referenced so much throughout the book. I think that was really nice sort of payoff to that whole thing, because you're reading it the first time, you don't know like what that's all about, and it's a weird like little physical detail about Brea that she's has that sort of impairment in a way, and then to hear that she went through a life-threatening event for her trial kind of lets you know how serious the royal family of Alderaan takes that. That's not just, oh yeah, just go climb a hill and you get to be queen. It's you really have to challenge yourself and prove yourself.
Yeah, and I think one of the other challenges that kind of added to the drama and really kicked us off was when she had to do her first humanitarian mission, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's also something that was kind of fun that Luke and I were talking about. That's where we kind of start to see another planet other than Alderaan. Where do we go? We go to Wobani, right?
Mhm.
And we see that there she comes across a bunch of different prison camps that seem to have a lot of people in really poor conditions. And she kind of gets this very Princess Leia-esque idea that she's going to make her parents proud of her and bring all of these people back to Alderaan with her, right? And then we see that that mission doesn't really go very well.
It's bold.
It's very bold, but I think, that's kind of where we see she is naive, but she also has, that very strong will to do the right thing and to help everybody out. Okay, we're back after some really intense technical difficulties.
Yeah.
But at least it wasn't a case of Michael not hitting the record button.
Hey, that was a good one, Holly. That's funny. Now the jokes are coming out. Where was that in the first minute? Anyway.
All right, so we're going to jump right back into Wobani. That's where we are now. That's where Leia's doing her first humanitarian mission. I think, Luke.
Yeah, Wobani. First little Easter egg is that's the planet that Jyn is on at the beginning of Rogue One when she is in the prison camp. And it mentions in the book how the Empire's taken over large parts of the planet to establish some prison colonies. So I thought that was a nice little touch, that it wasn't just some random planet that had a connection to one of the movies, because those are always nice to see. And then from there, I don't know if anyone else thought of this. I think a lot of you have seen most, if not all, of Rebels, and the way she kind of pulled one over on the Imperial officer made me think of, there's a Rebel episode where she is trying to pass off those 3 cruisers to the Rebel cells, but not make it seem like she's aiding the rebellion, because she, is still trying to have some cover because she's part of the Senate. That's a great Rebels episode when she kind of does similar things to kind of trick one of the Imperial officers and make sure that the Rebels get the 3 cruisers. So it made me think of that, and that was another nice tie-in to this scene.
Yeah. What was that? Princess on Lothal? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Lothal? Yeah. Yeah. You guys know me, and I love Rebels, and I still haven't finished it yet, but I thought about that Princess Leia a lot when I was kind of reading towards the end of this book, where you start to kind of see her gain a little bit more confidence. And I actually also thought about that episode and just how cunning she is, because she's very smart. She's a very smart Star Wars character, and she can she can think very quickly. And I think that we kind of see that, how she gets that from her parents and the way that her mom is too. But Luke, I love that reference because I thought about that as well. I think another planet that we see in the book that we also see in the movies is Crate, right? That's a planet that comes up in The Last Jedi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of fun. Not so much really, I guess, an Easter egg per se, but just another reference. This book came out before The Last Jedi. So it's part of the journey to The Last Jedi, right? So I think that's kind of a fun way that she kind of set us up for that. I guess while we're talking about Easter eggs, something else that I saw some people were talking about after they read the book was there's a scene, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but there's a scene towards the end of the book where she's trying to catch a ship, right? She's really got to go. And she's trying to track down anybody who will take her off of Alderaan. Or was she on Coruscant or Alderaan?
Yeah, she was on Coruscant.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, she's on Coruscant. And I think that she kind of mentioned seeing a ship that looks like it was in very dire needs of repair. And she tried to catch it, but it flew away. Did any of you guys think while you were reading it that was Han Solo?
I
Definitely
kind
seem
of
to
did.
be hinting at it.
Yeah.
Was it
Yeah,
Lando
especially-
taken off after they did the Kessel Run? I mean,
Especially because they mentioned that it is an old YT freighter, and she says that it needs. I actually have a whole list of Easter eggs that I thought was pretty sweet, but I definitely had that one down. And she said that that it said it looked like it needed money for parts.
Yeah, which we know it's a piece of garbage, right?
Hmm.
That's the running joke that we have, and they didn't say it here, but I think it's kind of fun. Like, Rory, what else do you have?
I mean, it's kind of all over the place with mine. And when she visits Naboo, she said that she has a sense of sadness and she can't really put her finger on it and doesn't really know why. Another one, Queen Dalne gives her a dress that looks a lot, or that sounds a lot like the dress from the end of Phantom Menace. The one that she wore at the celebration of Naboo, and then Karash Panaka, which I don't know if we were going to get into that, which he definitely knows or is figured out who she is, and then then he's killed by Saw Gerrera's forces, and I mean I'm sure we all are aware of who he is, but just in case somebody who doesn't know, that was Queen Amidala's security captain, and then he became a Moff, which is a Legends thing that I found out when I looked up. I did not know that. That was something that I did not read in Legends, but it's apparently the first time that it's mentioned in canon that he did indeed become a Moff.
So I guess
Yeah, I think that's a great
yeah.
It's a great example of the way that how deep like Claudia Gray's knowledge of, and I think how well she plays in the spaces in between the movies that she's allotted for these books. And I think a lot of the authors, you can tell sometimes, feel claustrophobic by the way that the movies box them in the little slice they're given to write a book. And Claudia Gray seems to like revel in it. And she creates this wonderful tension in that Panaka scene where you as the reader, the Star Wars fan, know who he is and know what connections he's drawing, that Leia could be Padme's daughter, and then to think, oh no, where's this going to lead if he tells the Emperor of his suspicion, and then to have him knocked off also by Saw's partisans, which is just another connection. So she's layering in these connections and playing in that space.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk about that scene. So Jory, that was a really great segue you bring that up, because I think that's also a scene that Paige and I had a conversation about outside of it. Paige, what did you think about when she put the dress on and he kind of saw her for the first time and kind of started to question who she was?
I mean, I was sitting there and I was like, he literally figures it out like 5 to 10 minutes who she is. How dumb are the Emperor and Darth Vader that they can't figure this out? It just boggles my mind that they can't figure any of this out, because Padme was good friends with Bail. She obviously knew Brea. Like, they look very similar. I mean, I just thought it was funny. I think it was really funny. And how panicked he was, and how he like thought he had like good goss to give the Emperor, and then he just gets blown up. I mean, I thought that was pretty fair.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. He also kind of starts asking, like, how old are you? How many?
Yeah, it was creepy.
And she definitely felt uncomfortable, and I think that there's a scene later, like after all that happens, and she talks to Brea about it, and she kind of like brings it up, like what an odd interaction that I had, and I think that there's a lot of concern there, and it kind of shows like how quickly like people actually can figure out possibly like who she is, like where she comes from.
Yeah, and Brea was like, he asked you what? I'm sorry. Yeah.
See, it's funny that you guys took it that way, because I took it in a completely different way, and it's just it's funny how different people view it differently. Because I thought he seemed rather genuine. And maybe that was because of the way it was portrayed in the audiobooks, which Paige, you listened to it that way as well. I don't know if Luke thought the same, but I thought he seemed a little genuine as to, figuring out who she was. And then I don't know if he would have turned her in. I mean, it kind of seems like, there's a good possibility. But in the same, I guess we'll never know, because they even talked about how that they thought that Panaka was the best candidate for them to bring in, maybe not into the rebellion, but to negotiate with, on their terms.
But it speaks to, this is Mike, I'm off camera now because we had some buffering issues, but it also speaks to his dedication to the Empire, right? And Naboo, because he was solely dedicated to the princess, or the queen at the time, right? Her mother. And now it's just like you're completely, turning your back on her and her family now to tell the Emperor this information. This is a few years ago that I read this book, and that moment sticks out to me, and the way it was written. I mean, I obviously know that the Emperor doesn't find out about this, but I found myself, oh my God, what's he gonna do with this? It's like, and then it just kind of really has to die or something has to happen. But the way he wrote it and took a character that we know about, we know, what he's capable of, but we really don't care about him. It was really, I don't know why. Immediately I was just taken aback. I was like, oh my God, he knows this. What's he gonna do? And then but it was, I don't know. I really, really enjoyed that part, like Luke said. Taking someone that we really never would have thought would have been discussed again, in my opinion, Panaka, and throw him into such an important moment. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Well, Jory, I do think when I was reading it, at first I thought, just because the way that they talk him up, and the Queen is saying, he's loyal to his planet, and he wants what's best for his planet and the people on his planet, so he would be their best chance at getting the resources and the answers that they need, right? And so I don't think that at that time, as we're reading it, you don't think that he would do something like sinister, but then at the same time everyone's out kind of to get on the good side of the Empire and make sure that their planet taken care of by the Empire if anything else goes down. So I kind of feel like, if you want to look at it, maybe I'll play devil's advocate, I guess, from his perspective, like, would I turn her in? I don't know.
I think that's an extra part of the tension. Claudia Gray writes that, like, he is a good person at heart, but he's also very loyal to Palpatine, because he owes a lot to Palpatine. He owes his station as a Moff to Palpatine. So I think that's part of the tension. Is no, this is a good guy, but he would discuss this with the Emperor, like, oh, this is interesting. He wouldn't do it, I think, to make knowing something bad could happen to her. He would just do it like, oh, this is really interesting. Remember, Padme? I think she had a kid. That's weird.
What about you, Nettie? What do you think?
I don't know if I can add too much to it. Definitely enjoyed the situation. Say, I've always liked the character of Panaka, as minor as he was. So I definitely thought it was really cool to see him come back in any form.
Yeah.
Has anyone else?
Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has heard this. I heard, when Attack of the Clones comes around, you have Captain Typho instead of Captain Panaka. And I think I heard the only reason it wasn't Panaka in Attack of the Clones is because the actor didn't want to return. Does anyone else heard that?
That's what I read as well, but I don't know, how accurate that is. But that was the only explanation I had too.
Yeah, it's interesting to give the character new life, even though the actor didn't return, or for whatever reason they switched the character in Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard that either, but I kind of feel like there's all kinds of different fun facts that go along with this book.
He saw episode 1. He's like, God, never.
I'm out
again. Like, I can't again.
How dare you, Mike? How dare you?
Well, what other characters though are making that decision when the Empire comes around? Because I mean, like, the Empire is in charge. Palpatine just took over in a matter of moments and runs everything. So I mean, what would we do in that situation? Like you said, Molly, like, It's your only source of like recognition. There is no Senate anymore, essentially. So
Well, I mean, there is, but like, what power?
I am the Senate.
Yeah. See, and that's a problem, right? What power do they actually have? But yet they still have to go through the motions, which I think was another thing that scene that we just discussed kind of did really well. It kind of shows you like the grip that Palpatine has on everybody and how they were kind of put between a rock and a hard place because they have to, give him what he wants if they want to stay alive, essentially. Jory, you had something?
No, I just think that it really connects well at the end of the book with Kier, because he had the choice to make as well. I mean, it's pretty much the same choice. It's between his planet and and the rebellion, and so it's hard to say what Panaka would have done, because Kier would have, I don't know if we want to get into the end of the book already, but Kier was going to turn them in. So it is hard to say, and even with Kier's point of view, he supposedly loved Leia, and and Panaka is in a position to where he may have loved Padme, but what does he have for feelings for her kids and things like that, the people that he doesn't even know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We can keep running with that maybe. So we get introduced to this apprentice legislature, right? That Leia is a part of, and it's her first encounter with other people that are her age. And that's where we kind of start to see that, she might be maybe that's why she's a little bit more mature the way that we read her in the book, because she spent a lot of time around adults. She spent a lot of time around adults who are making hard decisions and who are in positions of power, and they kind of, weave that into her life. And now we see her interacting with other people her age, and we meet two other characters that kind of stick with us throughout this book, and another one kind of throughout the movies. So we meet Amilyn Holdo, and like Jory brought up, here. So I kind of think that we can kind of get into those characters a little bit more, because those are two very important people in this book. So we can start with Kier, and that's somebody who she kind of started to get along with, maybe had a little bit of romance with. Did anybody else pick up on when she was having a conversation? Leia was having a conversation with her mom, and she was kind of talking about Kier a little bit, and her mom kind of got kind of like on her level a little bit and was like, I thought that it would be good if your first love was like a little bit of a scoundrel. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. Yeah, Nate's saying, yeah. So I kind of thought that was a fun quote, because when we think of Princess Leia and her love interest, who do we think of? Han Solo.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say Casterfo, but yeah, that's another book. That's another book. Holly hasn't read yet.
Yeah, that went
okay.
Right over
my
head. So
that's definitely one of the Easter eggs I had noted too. So I like, we talked about that, Holly, I think when we were both in the middle of the book. That's another great one. That line of scoundrel, because that is so associated with Han. That's another, just the brilliance of Claudia Gray to throw in all these. The whole book is just peppered with them. She's so connected with all the lore.
I know. I have a lot of them written down. Like Jory said that he did. I have quite a few others that I really liked.
But going on Holdo, I think it adds a lot of weight to her decision in The Last Jedi to place so much trust in Holdo, that she goes this far back with her in her connection, and how in these strenuous, stressful moments that Holdo's there for her and helps her. It helps you to understand, that when she's incapacitated in The Last Jedi, that it's Holdo that the command falls to.
Yeah, absolutely. Paige, I think that you were very excited to see Holdo come in the book.
Yeah.
So why was that?
I didn't really. What? Well, yeah, kind of. I didn't really like her a ton when Last Jedi came out, because we didn't really know a lot about her. But then when I read the book, I got excited first off because she's extremely weird. She's like the Luna Lovegood of the Star Wars universe, which
That's
is really fun.
what I said.
Yeah, and and it's like she's a good friend for Leia because she teaches Leia not to judge people by their appearances, and Leia kind of teaches her to calm down, which is they're good friends for each other. But also she's kind of queer, which I love personally. There's not enough of queer things in Star Wars. That kiss wasn't enough. I'm sorry, that was nothing. Not to be that person, but I mean, she's just very open with herself, and she's very free, and she's a good person, and I just really like her a lot. I think she's a sweet person, and she makes the best decisions for the moment based on her own sense of morality, which I think is different than probably Leia's sense of morality, which is good.
Yeah, I think that they balance each other out really well. I think that there were quite a few things that Holdo said throughout the book that, like, she was built up to be this really, like, odd, quirky character, right? And then she has these moments where she's just, like, very level-headed and, like, very sensible. And you're just like, wow. And
she's so smart.
Yeah,
she's
you were
so
kind
smart.
of alluding to that. Where she, like, talked Leia down, right? So, and I don't feel like, I don't know what you guys think, but I don't really feel like we get really that quirky side of her in the movies as much as we did in the book. So I don't know if you guys think maybe she just grew out of it, or that's just not part of the character that they decided to take on. But
I thought that actually could have been very effective if they would have made her a little more quirky, but then again, taking her as like the person in command would have been difficult to believe. But to have someone who's kind of quirky, who's in charge, but then makes the ultimate sacrifice in the way she did, I feel like that would have been very just like stunning. But I wasn't a huge fan of Laura Dern playing her. I love Laura Dern. I didn't believe it. I don't know why. I usually believe Laura Dern, and I didn't believe it in that role. So maybe someone a little more quirky would have been better for me, but I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, she was very serious in the role.
No, I agree completely, Mike, because, sorry, Luke, of course, Skype decides to make us cut each other off again.
Everybody needs to raise their hands.
Right?
Raise your hands.
But, no, I agree completely, Mike, because with Laura Dern, like, honestly, so my interpretation of Holdo, and the only reason I even knew that she was supposed to be quirky was because I read that when I watched The Last Jedi, because in The Last Jedi, Laura Dern plays her more, I mean, she's eccentric with, how she dresses and her hair and things like that, but the quirkiness, you don't really get that at all from Laura Dern, and we don't know how that she was told to be portrayed. We don't know the behind the scenes of it, because I think Laura Dern's a fantastic actress, but we didn't really get a lot of like the oddness, I guess you'd say, from her in The Last Jedi. And granted, The Last Jedi was a very serious time, for her the entire time she was on screen. So maybe that kind of plays into it. But if you didn't know, if you, like me, like this was the first time that I had read this book, if you didn't know that, you would have no clue why people are thinking that.
Yeah, and people mature in different ways and stuff, so maybe she kind of grew out of that. But they are very starkly different characters, and I don't know if I would say Leia is that different. So maybe something happened, she matured more, or something.
Well, I think it'd be fascinating to know like what notes Ryan Johnson, passed to Claudia Gray.
Yeah.
For writing these books, because you have to figure, the people at like Lucasfilm Publishing are passing information to these writers as they're writing, a book that's part of the journey to The Last Jedi. And I think Jory is exactly right. And part of the eccentricity was just trying to be conveyed in the film via her dress, because everybody else, she's a military leader, and she shows up with purple hair and an evening gown.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? This is the way a military leader dresses? I know we had Mon Mothma in Return of the Jedi in a robe, but she wasn't so much the military leader of the rebellion. She was sort of a spiritual head, a figurehead, sort of who could, draw people in with the way that she could convey the message of the rebellion. But she wasn't the military leader. You had people in more military dress, like General Crix Madine and those people, and Akbar, who who look more militaristic. But Haldo shows up with like jewelry and purple hair and a dress, and you're like, this isn't very, military. And I think another thing that I took as a connection to a Haldo, and I almost said Luna Lovegood, like Paige photo.
Yes,
You're welcome.
I'm not alone.
the Haldo we see in the book connects to me to the Haldo in The Last Jedi in that she's like a bit aloof and in her own head, I think, too much, where she has a little bit of trouble connecting with people. Like throughout the pathfinding, she always jumps in with these like random thoughts that nobody else is thinking of, and everyone's like, where did you get that from? So I think I don't blame Poe entirely for what happens in The Last Jedi. I think obviously Haldo could have done a better job of being more transparent with him about what was going on, and could have maybe avoided the whole mutiny thing. And I think that's just part of her like aloofness being conveyed. It's not as direct as in the book.
And maybe she experienced something similar to Poe.
Maybe we just need a Holdo book.
I'd be down.
Yes, please.
Right? I'd also be down to see
Yes.
Akbar in a gorgeous evening gown as well. So
Why not?
Obviously.
Right?
That's a cosplay, right?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little difficult to swim in, but
No, it would flow.
it's true.
It's fine.
It can just be a dressy scuba suit, and
Gorgeous
you
mud
get that
Yeah,
no resistance. Gorgeous
Yeah.
mud gown.
no pun.
No pun.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Yeah, I think I really wasn't sure about how I was gonna feel about her kind of in the beginning. When like we first meet her, and she's kind of a little bit hard to take seriously to me. Just when she comes in with kind of like Luke said, these like non sequiturs and like where did this come from? And then like all of a sudden she started saying very wise things, and I think that kind of added to Leia's development and her ability to become more confident in her decisions and kind of look at things from a bigger picture. And I kind of feel like maybe we all need like an Amilyn Holdo in our lives.
Did she sound like Luna in the audiobook?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think kind of.
a little bit.
Spacey. Yeah. But like
They
not
just
like she wasn't super out there, It was like held in to a certain extent, but
They just made her voice in the audiobook was like extremely high pitched.
Yeah.
Like
it was kind of dreamy.
Yeah, it was a little dreamy for sure, but it was extremely high pitched, and that's the only reason I said it didn't sound like Luna Lovegood, because Luna does sound differently. I'm an audiobook nerd, like that's all I listen to. I mean, just audiobooks all the time. So I guess it doesn't sound like her, but she definitely, like you said, she was dreamy and definitely out there, with the way she did or the way she spoke.
Did she have an accent?
Mm-mm.
No.
No.
Because I feel
That's
like
fine though.
I feel like a lot of the characters in Star Wars have like a British accent.
Well, they're the enemy though. No, that's Australian.
That
Hold
was.
on, let me get it.
Here, try it again.
Okay, I don't think I
Nope.
can. Nope, it won't go away. I'm also
Okay.
gonna mute myself.
Don't hear from Michael again. It's because he can't get the Australian out of him. Phrasing.
Phrase. Holy cow! Wow, that was a good one.
All right, so let's talk about the other character who is very prevalent throughout the novel, Kier. I kind of feel like there's a lot to unpack there. I guess where do we start? He comes across as this very dependable, charismatic,
Dreamy.
I guess
Looks
dreamy.
like Robert Pattinson.
He kind of sounds like a full package, right?
Yeah.
I don't
Wow.
know.
Apparently, she based him off of Richard Armitage in episode 1.
Really?
Allegedly,
Ah.
from the internet. That's what I saw.
Interesting.
He was a pilot. Fun fact.
Ah.
I didn't hear that. Huh.
He was a Naboo pilot. You're welcome.
Interesting. Well,
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know, Nate. What did you think? Were you surprised that there was a budding romance between Leia and Kier, or did you kind of expect that to happen?
To going into the book, I wasn't expecting it. Once the character kind of came in, I was kind of like, okay, this is what they're gonna do with that. Definitely was not expecting the ending for Kier that happened, but we can get into that later. See, I found, and this is something I kind of noticed when I watched Solo for the first time. I found it kind of hard to really get into that romance because I know Leia's just going off and going to end up with Han. So, like, I compared it to Solo. The same time I watched it the first time with Kira and Han, I kind of had that same feeling like, I know this isn't going to last. Which Kira became a favorite character after a few rewatches, so maybe Kira would become a better one. But, yeah, those were my initial thoughts. So.
Yeah, kind of like I have a bad feeling about this when they start liking each other.
Isn't it odd a little bit that the love interests of Han and the love interest of Leia sound so similar phonetically? Kira. That's. I think it's got to be a coincidence, but because I think Kira was named Kira in Solo because I think George Lucas's original Episode 7 draft had a character named Kira instead of Rey, but they wanted to like reuse the name in honor of that, and so maybe Claudia Gray kind of knew that, and that's why she made the name so close for Leia's love interest here. That's just a weird little thing that came to me when I love that Nettie brought up Kira and Solo because I love the Solo movie. I don't think it gets enough credit or talk most of the time, but I like that. I think Nettie kind of said he didn't like it too much because he knows it's doomed, because obviously we know he's not around by the time of the original trilogy, and she ultimately ends up with Han, and that's doomed in several ways. But I kind of like that tension, and again, I think it's another example of Claudia Gray does that well, utilizing the knowledge of the audience to build tension and drama within the story. Is like, oh gosh, it's like when Ahsoka was introduced in the Clone Wars, and everyone's like, oh, she's gonna die. Because she's not around during episode 3 and all of that. So playing with that audience knowledge about what's to come down the road is just a staple in Star Wars, and I think some of the authors do it really well. So I kind of like the use of that as a storytelling tool, even though we know it ultimately isn't going to be happily ever after.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I was reading it, because I agree with you guys, we all knew that at some point something was going to happen to him. Inevitably it was. And there were a lot of points throughout the novel where I was like, oh, this is it. This is when it happens. I think the one that stands out the most to me is when they're climbing the mountain and they're partnered up, right? And then what happens? His rope breaks. Is that right? That his rope that breaks? And she tries to catch him, and he falls, right? And I was like, oh, this is not when it happens. I was actually surprised that he kind of stuck around through the end, because I kind of thought that something was going to happen to him maybe like 3/4 of the way through, and that was going to be like a big thing for Leia, and that was going to kind of change her and kind of be the turning point where she goes from kind of being this naive girl to like somebody a little bit more mature who can make some of those decisions that like your stereotypical queen is supposed to be able to make, right? I don't know if there are any other points that you guys were reading the novel where you're like, oh, maybe this is when something bad happens to him. But yeah, I think ultimately that was the one big one that I saw. But did you? Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So do we want to kind of dig into the ultimate twist? And because I think we could spend a lot of time on that. It really caught me off guard.
Yes.
That he was going to turn Leia in and turn the rebellion in, but it is just the brilliance of Claudia Gray, again, playing with what the audience knows about what happens to Alderaan. She gives us a character who puts Alderaan above everything else, and he wants to protect it, and he worries that the leaders of Alderaan, being leaders of the rebellion, will ultimately doom Alderaan. And he's right, and we as the audience know that. And so he's trying to actually save Alderaan, which we know gets blown to smithereens in episode 4. And again, I just can't give enough praise to Claudia Gray, because, like I said earlier, I think some of these authors feel a little boxed in by the little sliver of timeline they're given to tell a story in between movies, and she does such a great job using all the things we know about what comes before and what comes after, and building tension with it, and giving us an interesting story and like another point of view, a certain point of view. And so Kyr's sacrifice to me is extra bitter, because his ultimate goal was well founded. Alderaan was endangered by all of this, but at the same time, Leia and her parents, felt it was worth it. The risk was worth it. So I just can't speak highly enough of Claudia Gray's, the way she lays out her plots and ties them into everything.
Yeah, Jory?
Oh, Jory's muted.
Oh, just kidding. No, just speaking on what Luke just said, with here though, this was kind of the first time. Granted, we kind of talked about this last time, how I don't really guess through books, but this was one of the first ones that I actually did kind of guess to myself as I read through, because it was kind of like, okay, how is he going to perish? And I actually did kind of think that he might go behind their back. And the only reason I say that is because he kind of hints multiple times throughout the book that it's very dangerous, what they're doing, and that the survival and the future of Alderaan is very important to him. He said it multiple times to Leia, even just when he was checking in on her, seeing how she was doing, and then, seeing how she reacts to certain things. And I think they even commented on it a couple times of he's studying her, and she kind of is taken aback at first by, why he's studying her. And then he explains to her, well, I want to see how my future leader is going to react to certain things. And so that told me, and even with him mentioning that Alderaan means the world to him. I mean, obviously the world to him. So, I mean, it was something that I kind of saw. I didn't know how it was going to happen. It was something that I just guessed, that he might end up betraying her in the end.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Now that you say that, there are a lot of other points throughout the story where they're together, and she says she'll say something, or she makes a decision, or she'll say she's going to do something, and he's like, well, you have to do that, but just because you're queen. Or do you think that you should be doing that? Isn't that too dangerous for someone who's going to be queen to do? And it kind of, I don't know, I didn't really think about it the way that you were saying it that way. I just thought that he was trying to get a better understanding of like how her decision-making process worked as a friend, and not so much as seeing her as the future leader of their planet. So I think that's interesting.
I definitely think that he was kind of doing both at the same time. I think that he definitely had the best intentions with her. But I think when it got too deep, and it got to the point of like where he was like, it's either the planet or the rebellion, I think that was when he decided, it's our planet. We're gonna make it through this, and I have too many people that I love, or just honestly, he just loves Alderaan. He loves the history of Alderaan, and so it just came to the point of where he's like, I have to choose.
Yeah, the stakes are really high, right? Yeah. Nate, did you kind of see this coming, or were you really surprised at the end when we find out that Kyr was probably going to turn them in?
I'm not sure if I saw it coming. I definitely see, hearing everything talking now, I can see why the decision was made, and looking back, and I think rereading it would be a really good idea to see all that foreshadowing, even in a more depth. Yeah, I definitely didn't fully see it coming, and everybody's been talking, I figured, Kyr would be, just kind of written off, or they'd break up and that was it. I wasn't expecting, to him to die trying to make that what in his mind was a sacrifice to report that rebellion. I definitely didn't see that coming, so.
Yeah, and the other thing that I thought a lot about when I was reading that particular scene was how Leia, a 16-year-old child, handled that happening, because I can just say personally, if that were me and this person that I trusted with all of my deepest, darkest secrets, and then I found out what he was going to do, I probably would have been, I think, really pissed off or just like super angry that I trusted this person. But she was the opposite of that. I think she was just sad, right?
And that's what's great about these side stories, Solo, Leia here. We're seeing why these people are the way they are. Like, it's great. People would say, we don't need that. I was one of those people. I don't need a Solo movie. But, like, now we know why Han is the way he is. Now we know why Leia is the way she is. Like, it is so great to go back and see that happen. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. I look at the way that, I mean, especially these characters who we know who they are kind of backwards, right? We start with I guess late teens, early 20s Leia, and then we kind of see her kind of like jump back to pre-Leia and then jump ahead to older Leia, and we kind of see some of these characters that same way all over the place. And I think it's just kind of interesting to fill in the gaps that way and kind of see what happened in between, because you can speculate all you want. I never would have guessed anything that Claudia Gray had written in this book, I'll tell you that. But I don't know, any other surprises that happened around maybe towards the end of the novel that kind of caught you guys off guard?
I'm curious about what people thought of the use of Tarkin. I really enjoyed that aspect, and that's one character we haven't touched on who plays a fairly significant role. It's clear in A New Hope when Leia's brought before him that they have a relationship and a history of something together. When Governor Tarkin, I smelled your foul stench when I was brought on board. They run into each other a time or two before that, so I think it was great to give some more background to that relationship and how menacing and clever he is.
Yeah, Joy, what did you think?
That was one of the Easter eggs I had written down too, Luke. Tarkin mentioned her about her talent of finding loopholes, and that was something that when she was able to get the prisoners on board and bring them home with her, and it was just another little callback or little Easter egg of like their future relationship. And so I think you hit the nail on the head right there, Luke, with just how they already pre-knew each other. They knew of each other, and they had a somewhat relationship beforehand.
Yeah.
I wonder
Go ahead.
if what I struggle with a bit, and I wonder if anyone else struggles with it or has like an explanation for why they think it is. Why did he tip her off that the Empire was going to go to where all the rebel ships were stationed? I can't remember the planet name now, but does anyone have a good theory, or did I miss it in the book? Was it given as to why he would have given them that warning?
I kind of thought that it was just, and I was kind of going to ask, not that specific, but kind of similar. I thought that it was because he suspected that she had something to do with the rebellion that was going on, but he wasn't 100% sure. And so he kind of threw that in to see then if anything would happen to, was that a moon or was it a planet? Does anyone remember?
I think it was a planet, but I might be wrong.
Yeah. I kind of think that he wanted to see if anything would change, because she was probably the only one that he gave that information to.
Right.
It's a matter of gaining trust, right? I mean, he's wanting information. He's tactful, and he's making allies. So I think that's probably a young, naive girl, the perfect opportunity, I guess. And yeah, it's definitely suspicious that she had involvement or knew of involvement.
Yeah, that's a great point, Holly, because now he knows, he figures, we'll get them eventually. They're not much of a threat. He's not worried. You can see that in A New Hope when people ask him, do you want to evacuate now? And he's like, evacuate in our moment of triumph? He has that arrogance that nothing's going to go wrong. So I think, thank you, Holly, for helping me get there on this. It seems like, he wanted to figure out if she was connected, and if he was the only one if she was the only one he tipped off, and then the attack was thwarted, he would know. she was connected. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And I kind of, and maybe I'm drawing parallels where there aren't any, but like I've said a bajillion times, I'm watching Rebels, and I kind of felt like his patience with trying to either get her to work with him or kind of like sway her more towards working with the Empire versus like potentially going into the rebellion kind of came off a little bit like Thrawn to me, as we see in Rebels, where he's just like very patient and he kind of watches the Rebels like win these little battles and then he's like, I'll let them go. Like that moment kind of seemed to me like we see Thrawn in Rebels, where he's kind of like, I'll give you this little bit of information because in the end that's going to be more useful to me than what's actually happening on that planet right now. But yeah, I thought that that was a really interesting thing. But yeah, Tarkin, I don't know. This is just me. I didn't really. There were weird moments where like Tarkin kind of seemed like this big, like scary, threatening character, and then there were kind of moments where I just felt like everyone was kind of messing with him. Like, do you guys recall the awkward dinner party?
That was everything. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, well,
I loved every minute of that.
What did you like about that?
I thought that was hilarious. I mean, the whole family pretending that Bail is having some kind of affair with Mon Mothma was just genius. I loved it. And they were trying to get him drunk the whole time.
Do you think he bought it?
Maybe a little bit, but I don't think he's that dumb. He didn't get that drunk, so.
No.
I don't know if he needed
but that's
to be
probably
drunk.
why he. No, but like that's probably why he thought Leia was more involved. Really, because she was at that dinner and Brea brought her into it, which kind of was a little bit of a mistake, but in the end made it a little bit more believable.
I thought he bought it. I really do. I thought actually both times, and granted, maybe I missed something in the way it was told, but I definitely thought that he bought what was going on. I think maybe in hindsight, afterwards, after the fact, maybe he thought of, maybe I'm being played here, and so that's why he went to Leia. But I think at the moment, I definitely think that he bought into the story.
I mean, it's so awkward. How can you not? I mean, I might be giving him too much credit, but I would buy that and I would get out of that immediately because that's the most awkward situation I could imagine.
Yeah, that whole scene, to me, I was like, oh my god, when is this going to end? It's so
I like
cringy.
how he scolds him, or he scolds them too, like, like he's their father, and, he's the grandpa at the table of like, what the hell is going on here, people? Like, get your stuff together and let's, it was actually, to me, it was slightly comedic just because like I could see, somebody's grandpa, telling everybody to get their act together and and just storming out.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know. I didn't really feel like he bought it, but then if he actually did buy it, then I guess, like, I know that we talk sometimes on the podcast about how, like, the droids are very much underestimated, and they kind of, like, get to do whatever they want, and no one ever, like, questions them. Like, I know, like, in Rebels, Chopper will, like, go up and, like, open things and let people in, like, right under everybody's noses, and I kind of feel we see in this book that Tarkin kind of does, I guess, then the same thing with, Leia and the younger people. He doesn't take them seriously, which I think ultimately is, yes, going to be his downfall. Jory? Oh, he's muted.
I think that's another really good segue into something, another Easter egg of a possible R2-D2 mention. And we're not sure. It was never really confirmed. But when Leia was talking to a certain astromech droid, and that she gave a special task to, and then she mentions that the droid has a lot of personality. They never say R2, and they never, give his call out, but I think we all kind of agree that it was probably R2.
Yeah, Nate, you're nodding a lot. Did you think that was R2 when you were reading that?
Oh yeah, definitely. See, I even went back after they started like describing its personality to like reread the description of its colors. I'm like, oh yeah, that's R2. And I think C-3PO was mentioned too at one point, wasn't he?
Oh, he was there.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Captain Antilles is there too, and we know they belong to him. So
Yep.
I definitely not a doubt in my mind that's R2 there.
Yeah, it's funny because in this novel we also get a mention of Obi-Wan.
Hmm.
Right? I don't know, Jory, if you had that. I guess he's directly mentioned, so maybe that's not so much an Easter egg. But we learn that at this point in time, Princess Leia does know who Obi-Wan is, right?
Yeah, we do, and we get a lot of just little mentions of people throughout. I mean, obviously Palpatine is mentioned. Darth Vader is mentioned. Anakin Skywalker is even mentioned at one point in the book. There's a lot of mentions of characters that we know. I didn't put them in my list, but you're right, Holly, that they do get just like the little nods that people of the galaxy, or at least people in government, know who they are. And obviously Leia would know too, because certain people would be probably talked about by Bale or Brea throughout throughout her life.
They mentioned several times that Leia, I think, listens to a lot of stories from Bale, because like Jory and Holly were just saying, she knows about all these other figures in the galaxy, I think, because Bale has talked to her a lot about everything he's experienced, before she was born even. And one of my very last Easter eggs I have noted that we haven't touched on is she tells Kier about a story that her dad told her, which is an episode of the Clone Wars. I think it's season 1, the season finale. It's when Cad Bane takes a bunch of the senators hostage. She tells Kier that story in one of the parts of the book as well. So I think that all is to show that she has sat at Bale's knee and heard so many stories about what he's experienced, and that's how I think she has a lot of the background of what's happened in the galaxy that led to the Empire, and how she knows, in the famous recording from A New Hope, you served my father in the Clone Wars. She knows some of that Clone Wars history through those stories from Bale.
Yeah. I kind of would have liked to have sit in on some of those stories. I know that I've said I've had a kind of a hard time getting into the Clone Wars. But I don't know. I just feel like those would have all been good ones, and you have to like wonder who else she heard stories about. I mean, people that maybe she doesn't even know like play a huge role in her life, I would imagine. Something else that I wanted to talk about, I guess this could be considered an Easter egg. I kind of feel like Claudia Gray slips so much into these novels that it's just so easy to get carried away and like, oh, here's this reference and that reference. But I think one really big reference that we haven't talked about yet is when Claudia Gray kind of alludes to Leia being force sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like that was a really big point in the book. And I know I kind of talked about that scene already, but it's the scene where her and Kira are partnered and they're climbing up that cliff, right? And she talks about, in this moment that other people, especially me, because I'm terrified of heights, would have been freaking out about, falling down the side of a mountain. She said that she felt very centered and calm, and kind of like just somehow like, what did she say? Kind of like the mountain or like what to do was kind of speaking to her. She just knew what to do and like where to go in that moment. I don't know, Jory, what did you think about that when you hit that scene? Were you surprised to see that she wrote about maybe Leia having kind of this sense of the Force?
I think even a couple times throughout, she just gets like senses about people that I kind of contributed to her powers with the Force. But I definitely agree with you, Holly, on in that particular moment. Definitely. I think that Claudia does just a fantastic job with anything she writes about, and kind of tying those little things in. And I definitely agree. In that moment, it was spot on.
Yeah, I think something that we kind of miss in the movies a little bit is her actually using the Force, which I think was something that I really liked in The Rise of Skywalker, is when we kind of get to see that flashback of Luke kind of training Leia. I thought that was really special. So I was kind of excited when I got to read this point.
I definitely think that, and even with how they kind of explain it in the book too, or even throughout, her biggest powers in the Force, I mean, since she stopped training, to actually with the fighting side of the Force, I think she gets the feelings about people, and if they are lying to her, or a sense of direction. And I think that she uses the Force in different ways that we don't always attribute to Jedi. And so I think that it's always very subtle, but I think that's the way that the Force works through her the best.
And that's such a new canon age kind of perspective of the Force, and that it's not just wielding lightsabers and lifting rocks. Yeah. It's, did she even know she was using this power? Kind of like I'm sure Rey experienced throughout her life. She didn't really know it. It's always been there, and it helped her in politics. Now, in Bloodlines, you'll see that she states kind of definitively that she didn't want to continue training because she didn't want that to be influenced on how she was going to not gain power, but gain respect and gain authority. So that's a great point, Jory. It's she may not even know she's using it, but it is inherently the Force that's kind of guiding her through those conversations and those feelings, and she may not even know that she's doing it. And it's why it's great looking back on these adventures and saying like, wow, was she embracing the Force fully there, and she didn't even know it. Super cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that part a lot. But was there anything else that really surprised you in this novel, Jory?
I have 2 more Easter eggs that I thought were pretty awesome. So when Leia, I forget where she exactly was at, but she was spying on a senator that she thought was kind of a dirty senator, and he was making a deal with a white coat, and it was for Quadanian steel, and we know that is for the Death Star, and he was only referred to as the director, and I think that this is Director Krennic. And I don't know if you guys thought the same, but I think that was a little cool Easter egg as well. And here's a spoiler for Bloodlines. So so since Holly hasn't read it,
that's okay.
I think that this was I'm glad actually that this one wasn't brought up, because I think that this is the coolest one that Claudia Gray has done. And so in Bloodlines, there was I don't want to spoil it for you, Holly, but basically there's a keepsake box that Leia has, and in the keepsake box, a certain character opens it. I won't mention the name of the character because that'll kind of ruin it for you. But a certain character opens it who is not supposed to open it, and it has that piece of Kier's hair that she put into the keepsake box in this book. And it's just a really little throwaway line that you wouldn't even really remember. And I actually happened to figure it out from just listening to Bloodlines recently. But it is Kier's hair. And so it's really cool that she tied these 2 books together with just a little tiny line that if you had never read Leia, you wouldn't know. And it's actually, the really cool thing is that Bloodlines was written before this was written. So I don't know if she had like an idea, and she already had something, in that. But I might be incorrect in that statement, but I believe Bloodlines was written before this, so it was really cool. Or no, Bloodlines was written after. So the fact that she put this away in this box in this book and then not really knowing, that she was going to in the future write this book for it it's just pretty mind blowing in the way that Claudia Gray works.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
little
now we
baby
got a
elder.
little baby elder on screen. First broadcast appearance. That's adorable. Stealing the spotlight. Sorry, Jory. But yeah.
I think Luke actually had mentioned how Claudia Gray will kind of throw in scenes from one novel that she wrote into another novel too. Luke, we were just talking about how in Bloodlines there's a scene where a certain character, who you missed it, but we're not naming it so that I don't get the book spoiled, but how a certain character opens up Leia's keepsake box and finds Kyr's hair in it. And there was another scene that you were mentioning that was in another Claudia Gray novel about the ball with the Imperial officers and the apprentice legislatures, right?
Yeah. Try to talk without my daughter fully waking up.
Sorry.
There's a scene in Lost Stars with that ball, and it's told from the perspective of the characters in that book, who are Imperial military cadets, and they get to meet Leia at the ball. And it's the same ball that we see in this book, but we don't get that scene repeated. But we know, or you can tell it's from the same event. And I thought that was a really cool touch, how she's not only obviously clearly tied in with the rest of canon, but her own Claudia Gray canon in that way.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool how she's tying it all together.
Well, and I'm sure when she was writing Bloodline, she was developing ideas for what got Leia to this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, throw that little nugget in there. We'll talk about it later. Later, there's much more story to tell. So, yeah, I'm sure has all these little points she's wanted to hit on for a while. Just finally got to kind of write it out. But
I just picture her, sitting in her office, typing, and then, laughing to herself and being like, I'm going to throw this in and we'll see who pays attention.
Seriously.
I would do that.
I feel like we're on a Claudia Gray kick right now. It almost makes me feel like we just need to finish them.
We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
It feels like it. It feels like that's where we're going.
Are you picking the next book?
I feel like I should.
All right.
But, we'll get there.
You all heard it here first. I kind of feel like the last point that I had that I really wanted to touch on, sorry to finish this up on a dark note, but we all know what happens to Alderaan. I feel like there are a lot of points throughout this novel where Breha continues to tell Leia, Alderaan is your home will always be here. I guess we were talking about that ball, and I think that the one part she's kind of debating whether she wants to go to this ball or not, right? And Breha kind of convinces her to go, and she says, your home will always be here. And I kind of feel like there's a lot of times throughout the novel where they're just definitively saying this is your home, it will be here, you can always come home. And I kind of feel like that made me very sad, because ultimately we know what happens, right? And I know we kind of touched on this, but did you guys pick up on that and kind of get this kind of sadness when you were reading through the novel page?
I mean, it kind of was beating over your head. Her last line in the novel is that's the one thing the Empire can't take away. I'm well, actually, give it a little time. They're gonna blow up your planet. I mean, yeah, it's her whole life is just sad. I mean, she doesn't even know. She has no idea how sad it actually is before she was even born. It was a nightmare situation. So I think that was a good thing to include. She has no idea she has a brother, a twin, who also is going through a similar not so great situation on a desert nightmare planet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a good thing to include, but I don't know. I kind of wanted her to have a nice, happy childhood without the tinge of sadness. That would have been nice.
Yeah, and we didn't really get to see that she had, I mean, we kind of pick up a little bit as we're reading where she's kind of nostalgic for the way that her relationship with her parents was before she doesn't understand what's happening, but before they kind of got involved with this resistance that was going on, right? But even then, you don't really feel like she got this happy childhood that she got to spend with friends instead of like a droid that was taking care of her while like going on diplomatic missions. So
yeah, the Alderaan moment in A New Hope is so, I don't know, it just, there's not a lot of weight to it, you know, and part of that's just the production at the time, like, and the quality there, but it felt like they were trying to add a little more weight to that, and that, you know, but also add to the resiliency of the character, that she did lose a lot, though you don't see her react much in the movie. This place really meant a lot to her, and had been really ingrained into her, and just to add a little more weight to that moment, because it's not that believable, and like I said, a lot of that's just the quality of the production at the time. But I mean, it's an entire planet being destroyed. It's
everyone reacts to trauma differently.
That's true. Know. That's true. That's true. And she had to in that moment, you know. That's to really show her resiliency. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just like the whole time I was just like, oh my God, you don't even know. You don't know what's about to happen. I feel so sorry for you. But I don't know, Nate. When you were reading this, did you kind of think, as you were seeing how like proud she was of her planet and how much she talked about how beautiful her planet was and how she loved it so much, can you kind of see how when she was also building these strong relationships with the other people in the rebellion or people who were about to maybe join the rebellion, like Holdo, how she kind of transferred those feelings of home from like her planet to just like the group of people that she was with?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Yeah, that she definitely kind of changes her sense of home and what's important. And going back to the whole Q situation, you know, Q is willing to put that planet, that home, above the greater good of the galaxy, but Leia doesn't make that I don't know if I want to call it a mistake, doesn't make that choice and puts the galaxy above her home and ultimately pays the price. So yeah, that's a very good point about how well they emphasize what the planet means to her. So
yeah, I that was probably seeing like that end quote that Paige just brought up, which I think you pretty much quoted it directly. She said, my parents, my friends, my world, things the Empire can never take away. And I kind of feel like when she started with like my parents, my friends, she put so much more emphasis on the people as opposed to like the planet itself. And so I kind of feel like that just kind of like encouraged her to continue working for the greater good of the galaxy, like Nate said, as opposed to just like her one singular planet. But Paige.
I didn't get the sense that she had a lot of friends before she joined the like pathfinding group and the apprentice legislature, but I think that was just me. Like, I thought she was more friends with like people in the palace. I didn't think she had friends like her own age. Really, I don't think she did, which I thought was really, really sad.
Yeah. I agree completely. I think that, you know, she even kind of mentioned in the book that that a lot of the kids that she played with, like, she'd play with them a little bit, but then there wasn't a lot of a bonding in there. And that she bonded mostly with her parents and her parents' work and the people of the palace and her droids. Or even she mentions, I think she has a dozen tutors. You know, she probably made bonds with all of those people, but the children of Alderaan, I mean, I think she loved her planet, but I don't know that she had a lot of personal, real tight bonds with anybody in particular that, I mean, other than Kier, that, you know, was notable. And once again, I don't want to sound like she didn't love her planet, because she definitely did, but there was no Han for her on Alderaan. There was, you know, it was just she loved her planet, she loved the people on the planet, but nothing that really, you know, connected to keep her.
I'm going to use my NPR voice for the rest of the podcast because I'm holding a 6-month-old who's asleep. Hopefully you can still hear me. I want to jump in on this one a little bit. I think it's a common theme in fiction that involves royalty, that or any leader, it's isolating to be a leader, to be royalty. Think of the classics. First Kid was a movie that came out when I was like 8, 9 years old, about the president's kid couldn't find any friends. Classic movie there.
She rich.
So, if I could do a little elsewhere in canon segment really quick, if you want to like keep diving into Leia beyond the movies, there's obviously Bloodline, which we've talked a lot about, from Claudia Gray, and then there's a 5 comic run of Leia early in the new canon days that is not my favorite, as I've really started to dive into more of the comics, but has an interesting premise, and that's right after A New Hope, and she's trying to sort of bring together any Alderaanians who were not on the planet when it was destroyed, because the Empire wants to wipe them out, and she's trying to protect them, so that's kind of an interesting premise. And then, in addition to that, I might have lost my train of thought. I thought I was going to, From a Certain Point of View novel, Mike, you were saying, the scene happens so quickly where Alderaan is destroyed in New Hope, and there's not much of a pause on that moment. There's a great short story in A Certain Point of View called Eclipse, and it's from the point of Brea, Organa, and Bail when the Death Star destroys Alderaan, and it's really beautifully written, and it's like, it sort of adds more of that weight that Mike said was missing.
Absolutely.
Not to be confused with Twilight.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. Also, another.
That's
great
also
series,
great.
Right? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're doing a Twilight podcast, right?
Yeah,
I feel like
we'll bleed into that after midnight.
A New Hope, New Dawn.
Yeah.
A New Dawn, A New Hope.
That's
I don't know.
the name of the podcast.
Yeah.
But Luke's right, because Palpatine even comes from wealth, and Darth Plagueis, which is not canon, though make it canon, Disney, he even is isolated and doesn't get along with his family, and it's just that royalty, it brings isolation, and sometimes it ends badly. But yeah, that's a great point from Luke or Seth Avett. I'm not sure who we have here. He unfortunately didn't hear the comment, but he's looking like Seth Avett there on the camera, if you can see him holding a child. Sorry, ladies, he's not single.
He gone.
He's gone.
I'm just happy that Luke isn't the only one dealing with kid issues right now, because mine's about to wake up. Might have to pull in Luke Elder and have a baby.
Well,
on
I
the
feel like
podcast.
I need a baby. I don't know, dog
Everybody.
or something.
Like Oprah says, giving away babies. Everybody, you get a baby.
Seriously. Seriously.
Well,
Mm-mm.
not for Paige.
Hold
Hard
Loki
pass.
behind you and just pick him
Yeah,
up.
there you go.
She would hold.
Sure.
She would hold Loki.
I would. I'd be into it. Thank you.
Amen.
Swaddle him like a
Amen.
child.
Swaddle
Don't make
her.
it weird,
Hey.
Holly.
Don't make it weird.
Anything else that you guys feel like we didn't touch on that you guys wanted to talk about? Because I feel like we went over a lot. I feel like there's so much in this novel to dissect. It's kind of hard.
I mean, I had 2 little Easter eggs. I'm sure you don't want to get into the whole Leia as a parent thing, since we are running long. I'm sure you don't want to get into that.
We're here. We can. If people don't want to listen,
I can get into it. But I have 2 little Easter egg things that I wrote down. So when she's talking to the Chowhuttans, the negotiations are kind of similar to Padme's negotiations with Boss Nass in episode 1. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then and Luke's not here for that, so okay.
Glam.
Yeah. And then when she's talking with Amelin, I think where they're doing the weird scarf exercises, I don't know. She says Amelin makes a comment to her, and she says she mentions a comment about a pair of pretty dark eyes, and Luke actually makes a similar comment. I'm so sorry, everyone. To Rey in an alternate scene from Last Jedi.
Yeah.
About Ben. So.
Interesting.
I'm just saying.
It's in the Skywalker blood.
Interesting.
I'm just saying.
So,
You're
because you
welcome.
think about it, you're like, Claudia Gray probably didn't have that many details.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But it's like word for word, that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, she actually may have gotten access to the script at some point, and that would have been a part of it since it was deleted. So yeah, they may give the authors those scripts like that. I mean, it is like Luke said, it's a journey to The Last Jedi, so they're going to give them the plot points, and that probably, I mean, is a big plot point in that movie where Luke kind of freaks out, and I'm sure she saw the unedited version.
Paige, those are really great insights, because I feel like there was so much to read and there were so many little things to pick up on in this novel that it's hard to get them all the first time that you read it. Nate, was this your first time reading this?
Yeah, this is my first time.
See, so you're in the same boat that I was. I feel like some of these things that like Paige, Luke, and Jory were able to pick up on, like I did not pick up on them. But that's just me.
That's why it's great.
I got them the second time, so it's okay. Yeah.
So beneficial.
That's what book club's for.
We I think Michael and I were joking the other day about how Claudia Gray, she's like so good with the way she builds things up and the way that she writes these characters. We're like, just write a script or write a TV show. She can give us more whole show.
I would like that.
Here's a petition
I would be into it.
for Claudia Gray to pitch a Holdo series for Disney Plus.
Wow, it may be done.
And make it queer. You know what I'm saying? Just make it queer.
And get Luna Lovegood or whatever her name is to play Holdo.
You think that actor would probably actually make a really good Holdo?
That's probably true.
Do you guys know, Paige? Do you
Ivana
remember?
Lynch?
Yes, thank you. I knew Paige would know.
There it is.
I got that useless information up here.
She's got it up there. I love it. Well, guys, anything else about Leia that really stood out to you or that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to mention? I think Leia's probably one of those books that I would want to read a second time. But I'm also curious now that we've been talking about it to get in the Bloodline, which Bloodline is on my list.
Yeah.
I think it was, I don't have my phone, but I wrote my list on my phone, and it actually might have been the book that I wanted to read for the month of April.
Bloodline, Lost Stars. I mean, keep going with the Claudia Gray.
I'm just saying, if we are into Rebels, there is a Kanan and Hera book. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I have to finish Rebels before I read that, though.
I'm just saying, I've read it, and it's like, oh my God.
It's good.
Look, there are many books to read, and there are many.
I know that.
That one's going
very aware.
Amen.
I haven't finished Bloodline, so like, I have no idea. I started it when it came out, and I haven't finished it. So.
That's right.
So, see, it's more of a reason to add it to the list. Nate, have you read Bloodlines?
I have, yes.
Okay. So this may potentially be your second time.
Right. That's right.
Sounds good to me.
Luke, any final thoughts on Leia?
Check it out. Give it a read. Good time.
You've heard it here, folks, from Seth Avon himself on the mic.
Well, thanks, guys, for joining us. I think despite all the technical difficulties that we had, I think this turned into being a really good conversation. So thanks for sticking with us.
I blame it on the coronavirus. I mean, I feel like they're buffering internet speeds right now. I feel like, things happen. Mm-hmm. It's an uncertain time, and so is your internet.
You just never know what's going to happen. We don't have the antivirus software to pick that up for the Macs anyway.
That was a really funny joke, Holly. That was really good. That was a nice virus joke. I liked it. But actually, you do have Bitdefender on your computer, so that was untrue joke.
Well, I tried. It was worth the effort, guys. Well, thanks again for joining us. We had a really great time, and I might have to give Leia a second read, and I'll let you guys know if I do that down the line and if I pick up on any of those. But as always, thanks for the insight and thanks for the commentary, and we will see you guys next time.